My dad turned to drink and criticized Mom after her brother cheated us, causing us to lose land. I am Mary, a sophomore in college, and my life today feels like a shadow of what it once was. Just a few years ago, my family embodied the warmth and joy that I believed would always define us. My father, a robust man with an infectious laugh, was the kind of dad who would spend hours in the garden, teaching me and my younger brother, Alex, the names of all the flowers and how to take care of them. My mother, a gentle soul with eyes that seemed to hold endless kindness, made our small cozy house a home with her loving touch and the heavenly smell of her cooking. Back then the future seemed bright. Our little family was tight-knit, bound by love and shared dreams, especially after my parents managed to buy a hectare of land from my uncle, my mother's brother. That land was more than just soil and greenery, it represented a legacy, a future where our family could build and grow, both literally and metaphorically. We envisioned a small family farm, maybe a few rental cottages that could nestle in the shade of the large oak trees dotting the landscape. It was a symbol of stability and hope, a tangible piece of prosperity that promised to anchor our family for generations. My Uncle James, my mother's younger brother, had always been a charismatic and persuasive figure. Growing up, I saw him as a fun-loving uncle who seemed to breeze through life, always with a ready joke or a small gift for me and Alex. He was a frequent visitor in our home, his arrival often heralding impromptu barbecues and late-night storytelling sessions. My mother adored him. She often spoke of their childhood adventures with a fondness and nostalgia that painted my uncle as not just a sibling but a hero in her eyes. This deep familial bond made him more than just an uncle to us. He was an integral part of our family fabric. My parents, especially my mother, trusted him implicitly. This trust was rooted in decades of shared history and mutual support. When Uncle James spoke, his words carried the weight of sincerity. Or so we believed. In hindsight, the signs of his financial instability were there, but they were subtle, overshadowed by his charm and our trust. He mentioned struggles now and then, hints about the economy, bad investments, the rising costs of living, but they were always presented as temporary setbacks. Nothing a good next move couldn't fix. So when Uncle James offered to sell a hectare of his land to my parents in 2013, it seemed like a golden opportunity. The land was located on the outskirts of our town, a lush expanse of green that bordered a small forest. My parents had always dreamed of owning more land, perhaps starting a small organic farm or building a few holiday cottages to rent out. The land my uncle offered seemed perfect for such dreams. The deal was straightforward, or so it seemed. Uncle James explained that he was selling the land because he needed liquidity to fund my cousin's college education. He painted a vivid picture. The land, once developed, could be the foundation of our family's financial security. My parents, eager to invest in our future and to help my uncle, agreed to buy it. The price was reasonable, the terms favorable, and the paperwork appeared to be in order, except for one detail. The Red Book, the official document proving land ownership, was still under the bank's hold due to a small loan my uncle had taken out. With reassurances from Uncle James that the loan would be cleared within a year, my parents proceeded. He crafted a promissory note, a casual yet seemingly earnest document, wherein he vowed to clear the debt and transfer the Red Book to my parents as soon as possible. Trusting him, they paid him the money, believing that the formalities were just a formality. Months turned into a year, and the promised Red Book did not materialize. My parents grew anxious, but each inquiry was met with reassurances and new promises from Uncle James. He always had a reason for the delay: paperwork snafus, bank errors, bureaucratic red tape. But his charm and our family's trust in him kept my parents from pressing too hard. This pattern continued until late 2018. That was when everything changed. The financial bubble that Uncle James had been inflating burst with shocking consequences. It turned out that the initial loan against the land was just the tip of an iceberg. Uncle James had been drowning in debt, far more than he had disclosed. In a desperate move, he had taken out further loans against the land, each one a deeper cut into the trust my parents had placed in him. The final blow came abruptly. Uncle James declared bankruptcy, and within weeks, we learned that he had fled the country. The news was delivered by a bank representative who arrived one crisp autumn morning to place foreclosure signs around the hectare that we thought was ours. The bank explained that the land was heavily mortgaged, far beyond its worth, and would be seized to cover my uncle's debts. The revelation shattered my parents. The betrayal by someone they had trusted so deeply was a wound that went beyond financial loss. My father particularly felt deceived and humiliated. He had advocated for the deal, swayed by my mother's trust in her brother and by the dreams they had harbored for that piece of land. The loss was not just a plot of earth, it was a future they had envisioned and promised to us. As the legal realities settled in, so did the bitterness. My father's sense of betrayal morphed into a festering anger that found its easiest outlet in my mother, who, despite being a victim herself, bore the brunt of his accusations and grief. The man who had once been the life of our family gatherings was now a source of tension and despair. In this new, harsh light, every memory of Uncle James was recast. The laughter and gifts, once signs of his generosity, now seemed part of a facade that hid his deceit. His stories, once enchanting, now felt like manipulations. The trust that had once bound our family to him had turned into a chain that dragged us down into a mire of betrayal and regret. The descent into despair was gradual at first, like the slow setting of the sun before darkness fully takes hold. My father, once a pillar of strength and joy in our household, succumbed to the weight of his disillusionment. His days began and ended with the bitter tang of alcohol, the bottles accumulating like silent markers of his decline. He no longer tended to his business, a small landscaping company that had flourished due to his love for nature and his dedication to his craft. Instead, he let calls go unanswered, projects unfinished, and slowly, the vibrant man who had raised me with laughter and lessons in resilience, succumbed to a listless apathy. It was not just the loss of the land that broke him, but the betrayal by his own brother-in-law, and the crushing responsibility of having convinced my mother to trust her brother. In his eyes, his failure was twofold. Not only had he failed to protect our financial future, but he had also placed his faith in a man who destroyed us. This sense of failure consumed him, leading him to relinquish all his hard work as if in surrender to an unseen foe. He wandered through his days like a ghost, his presence marked more by the trail of empty bottles than by any interaction with us. My mother bore the brunt of this transformation. The sharp edge of my father's tongue turned against her in his darkest moments. He accused her of complicity, of knowing her brother's intentions and yet leading us into ruin. His words were like daggers, and they sliced through the fabric of her self-worth every day. "Your family is a bunch of scammers," he would shout, the alcohol fueling his anger, turning it into a wildfire that consumed any remnants of peace within our home. Despite the onslaught, my mother's resilience was something to behold. She absorbed the verbal blows with a kind of stoic grace, her eyes often wet with unshed tears, but her posture remained unbroken. She became the buffer between my father's wrath and the rest of us, especially for Alex, my younger brother, who was just entering his teenage years amidst our family's crisis. Alex's rebellion against the situation was fierce and protective. He could not bear to see our mother demeaned and insulted. His confrontations with our father began as verbal skirmishes, challenging the unfairness of his accusations, defending our mother's honor with a boldness that both scared and awed me. "Stop blaming Mom, she didn't do anything wrong," he would yell back, his young voice cracking under the strain of his emotions. These clashes often escalated until the house felt like a battlefield, the air so thick with tension it was hard to breathe. Witnessing these exchanges tore at me. I was caught in a relentless storm of emotions, anger at my uncle for his deceit, despair over my father's downfall, and a deep gnawing pain for my mother's suffering. Each evening, as I heard my father's slurred accusations and my brother's desperate defenses, I felt a part of my heart crumble. The helplessness was overwhelming. I was a spectator in my own life, watching the people I loved tear each other apart. My mother, amidst this chaos, tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She went about her daily routines, cooking meals that none of us had the heart to eat, cleaning a house that no longer felt like a home, and trying, always trying, to mediate between my father and brother. Her efforts were Herculean, and yet, I could see the toll it took on her. The circles under her eyes grew darker each day, her smiles more forced and fleeting. She often pulled me aside, her hands clutching mine with a desperation that was hidden from the others. "Take care of your studies, Mary. Don't worry about us," she would whisper, her voice trembling. But how could I not worry? How could I focus on college applications and exams when home was a place of war? The weight of her suffering became my constant companion. I lay awake at night, listening to the echoes of their arguments, and wondered how much more we could withstand. The fear of the phone ringing with news of something worse kept me on edge, a perpetual anxiety that gnawed at my concentration, my peace. In those moments when the house finally quieted down, I would find my mother in the living room, staring out the window. Sometimes I joined her, sitting in silence as we both lost ourselves in the world outside. It was during one of these silent vigils that she finally broke down and shared her deepest fears. "I'm scared, Mary," she confessed, her voice a whisper. "Scared that he'll never forgive me. Scared of losing you and Alex to this hatred." Her admission shattered the last barriers I had put up to protect myself. I realized then that my role wasn't just to be a bystander. I needed to be her ally, Alex's support, and perhaps, find a way to reach my father. But the path to healing seemed obscured by the thick fog of past mistakes and present pain. Life at home had become a landscape of suspicion and bitterness. My father's distrust had deepened to a point where even the simplest acts of familial kindness were scrutinized and tainted with accusations. My mother's occasional visits to her mother's house, or her attempts to maintain some semblance of connection with her parents through gifts or phone calls, were not spared from my father's critical eye. He saw these gestures not as acts of love but as betrayals, further proof of conspiracies woven in his mind. One chilly afternoon, I returned from school to find the house unusually cold and quiet. My mother sat at the kitchen table, her face weary and lined with fresh worries. She looked up as I entered, managing a weak smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had been to visit Grandma, who was unwell, and had brought her some homemade soup and a warm blanket. When my father had learned of this, he exploded in rage, accusing her of wasting our scarce resources on her family, whom he now viewed almost as enemies. "Doesn't matter what I do, it's always wrong in his eyes," she confided in me, her voice breaking. "But I can't just stop caring for my mom, Mary. I can't." The situation with the phone calls was even worse. Every ring stirred a palpable tension in the air. My father, often fueled by his drunken stupor, would accuse my mother of conspiring with her brother, my uncle, despite my uncle having disappeared years ago. He couldn't seem to grasp that no one in the family had heard from him since he fled, leaving us to deal with the fallout of his actions. Each call, no matter the caller, seemed to him a ghostly echo of past betrayals, a reminder of the trust that had been broken and the financial security that had been stolen from us. Despite these overwhelming pressures, my mother continued to shoulder the responsibility of not just trying to keep our family together, but also ensuring that my two sisters and I could continue our education. My sisters, both younger than me, were in high school, facing their own battles with the ripple effects of our family's crisis. The cost of education was a constant worry, but my mother was determined that the chaos at home would not derail our futures. Seeing her struggle, I made the decision to take on a part-time job alongside my studies. I was now a freshman at a local community college, having chosen a school close to home to reduce expenses and stay near my family. My days were a blend of classes, studying, and working late shifts at a nearby cafe. Every paycheck I received went partly to help out at home and partly to cover my own educational expenses. This dual role of student and financial contributor was exhausting. There were nights I came home so tired that I could barely make it through dinner before falling asleep over my textbooks. Yet, seeing my mother's quiet gratitude and the way she fought to keep us all moving forward gave me the strength to keep going. She managed our meager finances with a precision and care that was nothing short of heroic, stretching every dollar to cover not just school fees, but the basic necessities of life. Her resilience was our family's unsung melody, a quiet background score that pushed us all to persevere. My mother never complained about her lot, accepting each day's troubles with a resolve that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Her love for us was an unspoken promise, a commitment that she lived out by enduring the harsh words and the colder silences from my father. My younger sisters, witnessing all this, grew in their own resilience. We became a team, albeit a silent one, finding comfort in shared glances and quiet conversations away from the storms that frequently brewed in our living room. We helped each other with homework, shared responsibilities around the house, and saved little surprises for our mother. Like the time we all chipped in to buy her a new book by her favorite author, hiding it under her pillow to find after a particularly hard day. In these moments, we found our pockets of peace, small oases of normalcy in a desert of chaos. My father's outbursts and suspicions became the storms we learned to weather, building stronger shelters in our bonds with each other. Each challenge, while painful, forged us into more than just siblings and a mother. It made us allies in a struggle that none of us had chosen but all of us were determined to survive. As I lay in bed each night, listening to the faint sounds of the house settling, I thought about my mother's sacrifices and my father's pain. The journey was far from easy, and many days, the burden of what we were enduring seemed too much to bear. But in the strength of my mother's unwavering love and the shared resolve of my sisters, I found a flicker of hope that perhaps, someday, we might find a way through the darkness, back to a place where love and trust could bloom once more in our family garden. It was a typical Thursday afternoon, the cafe bustling with the usual crowd of students and local professionals grabbing their midday coffee fix. As a waiter, I navigated through the tables with practiced ease, balancing trays filled with steaming beverages and the cafe's signature pastries. The hum of conversations mixed with the clatter of cups created a familiar soundtrack to my shifts. It was amidst this cacophony that I caught a glimpse of something, or rather someone, that froze me in my tracks. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure outside the large front window, a silhouette that was hauntingly familiar. The posture, the way he carried himself, it was unmistakably reminiscent of someone I had hoped to forget. My heart skipped a beat as I told myself it couldn't possibly be him. My uncle, the man responsible for so much of my family's misery, had reportedly fled abroad, a cowardly escape from the financial and emotional wreckage he had caused. Surely I was mistaken. But as the figure approached and entered through the cafe's front door, The reality of his identity became undeniable. It was indeed my uncle. The shock of seeing him there, in flesh and blood, after all the rumors of his departure overseas, left me rooted to the spot. Time seemed to slow as he casually strolled up to the counter, oblivious to the storm of emotions his presence had stirred in me. Dressed incongruously in a crisply tailored suit that seemed to mock the ruin he had left behind, he appeared not only unscathed by the ordeal, but prosperous. The fabric of his coat was fine, clearly expensive, with a sheen that caught the light as he moved. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and he wore a watch that glinted under the cafe's overhead lights, a stark contrast to the image of a bankrupt fugitive. As he ordered his coffee, chatting amiably with my co-worker, a surge of anger welled up inside me. Here was the man who had betrayed his own sister, my mother, leaving her to shoulder the burden of his deceit. Her life had become a daily struggle to maintain some semblance of normalcy for us, her children, while he seemingly enjoyed the freedom purchased at our expense. My hands trembled slightly as I took in the sight of him, so at ease, so removed from the consequences of his actions. How could he stroll into my workplace, a place just a stone's throw from the school where I studied and worked to support my family because of the financial mess he had created? The unfairness of it all, the injustice, burned through me. I felt profound sorrow for my mother. She had aged visibly in the past few years, each day etching more lines of worry and exhaustion onto her face. Her nights were restless, often spent in tearful worry, her dreams haunted by the fallout of trusting her brother. And here he was, dressed in a suit that likely cost more than what she could spare on groceries in a month. As my uncle took a seat with his coffee, I wrestled with what to do next. Confronting him was my first instinct. To unleash the pent-up frustration, to tell him about the suffering his actions had continued to cause. Yet, as I watched him, a middle-aged man enjoying his coffee, seemingly content with his world, doubt crept in. What could a confrontation realistically achieve? After a few moments of internal debate, I approached his table, my resolve firming with each step. "Uncle James," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He looked up, his expression one of mild surprise that shifted quickly to recognition. And fleetingly, something that might have been guilt. "Mary," he replied, his tone cautious. "It's been a long time. You've grown." "Yes," I said, the words tasting bitter. "A lot has changed since you left." We talked then, or rather, I spoke while he listened. I told him about the hardships we faced, about my father's decline, and my mother's silent resilience. I spoke of the responsibilities that had fallen onto my shoulders far too early, the dreams that had to be adjusted, and the family fabric that had been torn apart. He offered explanations, some semblance of regret, though whether it was genuine or not, I couldn't say. He spoke of bad luck and worse choices, of his own losses and regrets. But no apology could undo the damage, no words could reclaim the years of pain and hardship his deceit had wrought upon us. The conversation ended with no dramatic resolution, no promises of restitution. He left, and I returned to my duties, the encounter leaving a mix of sadness and catharsis. I hadn't changed anything, not really, but speaking my truth had lightened something within me. The afternoon had taken a turn I could never have anticipated. After meeting with my uncle at the cafe, I returned home filled with a mix of emotions. It felt important to share the encounter with my mother, to relay not just his words but the sheer normalcy with which he had presented himself. My mother listened quietly, her expression somber, absorbing every detail with a heavy heart. As I spoke, her eyes reflected a deep sadness, a well of emotions that seemed too vast and complex for words. She was silent for a long time, the air between us filled with unspoken thoughts and lingering heartache. It was a silence that spoke volumes, resonating with the weight of all we had endured, all that had been broken and lost because of my uncle's actions. Suddenly, the fragile quiet was shattered by a loud, angry voice. My father, who had been out of sight but not out of earshot, stormed into the room. His face was flushed with anger, his eyes alight with the kind of fiery intensity that had become all too familiar. He had overheard everything, and the information acted like fuel on the already burning fire of his resentment. Without a moment's hesitation, he launched into a tirade. The words were harsh and unforgiving, aimed indiscriminately at my mother, my uncle, and all her relatives. He accused them once again of conspiracy and betrayal, his voice rising to a crescendo of fury and frustration. The pain and bitterness he felt towards my uncle were now tangled with a renewed sense of betrayal, knowing that my uncle was back and living seemingly without consequence. In his rage, he turned towards a shelf in our living room, one that held various family dishes and heirlooms, and began to smash them one by one onto the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain filled the room, each crash a hammer blow to the already fragile peace of our household. My mother's face crumpled in despair at the sight, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth to stifle her sobs. I stood frozen for a moment, shocked and scared by the intensity of my father's outburst. The room felt smaller somehow, as if each broken piece of dishware was a fragment of our family's unity, irretrievably damaged. Amidst the chaos I found my voice, albeit shaky, and tried to intervene. "Dad, please stop. This isn't helping anything," I pleaded, my own voice edged with desperation. But my words seemed to fuel his anger further. He turned his wrath towards me, accusing me of siding with traitors, and questioning my loyalty to our family. The accusations were like slaps to the face, harsh and stinging. I struggled to maintain my composure, to stand strong in the face of the storm. My mother, amidst her tears, tried to calm him, reaching out to touch his arm in a plea for peace. But he was beyond consolation, caught up in his own spiral of anger and hurt. The situation escalated until, finally, exhausted and spent, he left the room, leaving behind a trail of emotional and physical wreckage. The aftermath was a heavy silence, the air thick with the scent of dust and broken porcelain. My mother sank into a chair, her body racked with quiet sobs. I moved to her side, wrapping my arms around her in a silent offer of comfort and solidarity. Together, we mourned not just the dishes or even the peace of our afternoon, but something deeper. The loss of what our family had once been, the easy love and trust that had seemed unbreakable. In that moment of shared grief, my thoughts turned anxiously towards my younger brother Alex. Known for his fiery temper and fierce protectiveness of our mother, I prayed he would stay away until the storm had passed. The last thing we needed was for him to come home and confront our father in his current state. The potential for violence was too great, the stakes too high. I didn't want this family conflict to escalate into something even more destructive. As we sat there, my mother and I, in the quiet aftermath, a profound sadness settled over me. It was a sadness for her, for all she had to endure. For my father, lost to his bitterness, and for Alex, who should have been spared from adult conflicts. I felt an overwhelming urge to protect them all, to somehow mend the fractures that had splintered through our family's foundation. But as I held my mother, feeling the tremble of her sobs, I knew that some things were beyond my ability to repair. The damage was done, the scars too deep. All I could do was offer my support, my love, and my presence, and hope that somehow, it would be enough to help us navigate through the wreckage of our shared past into a future that, despite everything, I still hoped could hold some measure of peace and reconciliation. The morning after the turmoil at home, I found myself at the coffee shop, mechanically performing my duties but with my mind elsewhere. The image of my father's wrathful destruction and my mother's silent tears haunted me, playing over in my mind like a nightmarish loop. Despite the busy morning rush, a part of me remained disengaged, distant. It was during this haze of distraction that I noticed a familiar figure through the shop's window. My father was outside, walking back and forth along the street, his eyes scanning the faces of passers-by. Unlike his usual disheveled appearance marked by the telltale signs of his drunken escapades, today he was sober, his movements deliberate. The stark difference in his demeanor piqued my curiosity and concern. It wasn't long before I realized he was probably looking for my uncle, the man who had set off the chain of events that had led our family to this precipice. Compelled by a mix of worry and a desperate need to understand, I asked my manager if I could leave work early. Once outside, I kept a cautious distance, trailing behind my father as he continued his seemingly aimless search. After some time, he stopped at a small convenience store to buy a bottle of water. With the bottle in hand, he walked to a quieter part of the street, away from the bustling crowd. There he squatted down and took a swig of water. It was then that I saw a vulnerability in him that I had never witnessed before, 2 lines of tears streaming down his face. Watching him at that moment, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Just the day before, he had been a tempest, a force of anger and destruction. Now, he seemed diminished, broken, crying like a child lost in a world too harsh and unforgiving. The sight of his tears, so raw and exposed, stirred in me a profound sadness. I wondered about the immense burden he must be carrying, the sheer weight of betrayal from a family member he had trusted implicitly. I didn't approach him. Instead, I turned away, allowing him his moment of private sorrow, and started the walk home, my own tears blurring my vision as I grappled with the pain of our fractured family. What had we done to deserve such a fate? The question echoed in my mind, each step towards home heavy with the gravity of our collective heartache. On impulse, I decided to take a detour to my grandmother's house. I needed a respite. A moment to gather strength from someone who might understand the depth of what we were facing. My grandmother welcomed me with her usual warmth, her keen eyes quick to see the distress in mine. As we sat together, I shared the events of the past few days, and in turn, she offered me insights into my father that I had not fully appreciated before. She spoke of the land, the piece of earth that had promised so much hope and potential. For my father, that land was not merely an investment, It was a testament to his dedication to providing for his family, a tangible representation of his love and commitment to our future. He had poured not just his money, but his dreams into that soil, dreams of security and prosperity for my sisters and me. It was supposed to be our legacy, a stable and secure foundation upon which we could build our lives. Your father has always wanted the best for you girls, my grandmother said, her voice tinged with emotion. He saw that land as a way to ensure you all had opportunities he never had. Losing it, especially the way we did, broke him more than you might realize. Her words shed light on the depth of my father's despair. It wasn't just anger or betrayal that fueled his actions. It was a profound sense of loss, not only of the land but of his role as our provider, of his identity as the man of the house. The loss had unmoored him, and what we saw, the rage, the helplessness, was his struggle to grapple with this new reality. As I listened to my grandmother, I felt a renewed sense of empathy for my father. Understanding the magnitude of his hopes and how deeply he felt their collapse helped me see past the fury and the broken dishes. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped explain them, framing his outbursts as cries of pain rather than expressions of inherent cruelty. In the midst of our family's turmoil, as I watched the strain and sadness inflicted upon us by my uncle's deceit and my father's subsequent unraveling, I often found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions about what paths my mother should take. There were moments, many moments, when I felt that the only solution for her, and perhaps for all of us, was to sever ties with my father. The man who once filled our home with laughter and security had become a source of pain and instability. It seemed logical, perhaps even necessary, for her to consider divorce as a viable path to peace. Yet despite my suggestions and perhaps even pleas, my mother never took that step. For a long time, I couldn't understand her decision. To me, it looked like an endless cycle of suffering. My father's bitterness and accusations, his thunderous outbursts that shattered more than just the physical tranquility of our home. It all seemed like too much for any one person to bear, especially someone as gentle as my mother. But as time wore on, and I witnessed more of the complexities of human emotions and the deep-seated bonds of marriage, I began to grasp the possible layers of her choice. My mother, with her enduring patience and almost unfathomable strength, perhaps saw beyond the surface of my father's wrath. Beneath his stormy veneer and the alcohol-fueled tirades, there was another man. A man she had loved and chosen to share her life with. A man who had once been the anchor of our family. She understood the depth of his despair, not just at the financial ruin that had befallen us, but at the profound sense of betrayal by his own brother-in-law, a man he had trusted implicitly. This betrayal had not just robbed him of a piece of land. It had robbed him of his dreams for our family's future, of his pride in providing for us, and of his mental peace. Understanding this, my mother likely felt that abandoning my father in his darkest hour would only add to the tragedy of our situation. Her commitment then, was not just to the man he had become but to the man he once was and, perhaps, could be again. It was a choice of compassion over condemnation, of hope over despair. As for my uncle, the architect of our misfortune, my feelings were far less forgiving. The more I pondered on the devastation he had caused, the more a part of me wished him ill. It was a dark thought, and it shamed me at times. Wishing death upon another person, especially a family member, was a heavy, terrible thing. But in my lowest moments, it seemed a fitting end for someone who had so selfishly dismantled the happiness of his own relatives for his gain. Uncle James had not just stolen money. He had stolen our security, our joy, and our ability to look towards the future with hope rather than despair. The fact that he continued to live comfortably, seemingly indifferent to the chaos he had left in his wake, fueled a bitter fire within me. I imagined him facing some form of cosmic justice, where he would finally understand the full weight of the pain he had caused. Leaving my grandmother's house, I felt fortified by a mixture of love and sorrow. The road to healing our family would be long and uncertain, but armed with this new understanding, I felt slightly better equipped to face the challenges ahead. My father's tears and the wreckage at home were not just signs of what we had lost, but also markers of where we needed to begin rebuilding. As I approached our house, the sight of it no longer filled me with dread, but with a resolve. We were broken, yes, but not beyond repair. With each step, I was making a silent vow to myself and to my family. I would not let our story end here, not in anger and despair. Somehow, we would find a way through the pain, guided by the understanding and love that still lingered beneath the scars, waiting to be rediscovered and nurtured back to life. On our wedding night, I discovered a shocking truth about my husband. He needed his mother's presence during our first night together. My name is Jenny, and I'm 26 years old. Our wedding day was, quite simply, everything I had ever dreamed it would be. As Alex and I stood hand in hand under the archway of blooming roses, our vows echoed softly under the vast blue sky. Our friends and family, gathered in a beautifully decorated garden, watched with teary eyes and broad smiles as we promised to love and cherish each other. The air was filled with the scent of summer flowers, the sounds of laughter, and the gentle strains of violin that seemed to weave magic into the atmosphere. It was a day marked by joy, a celebration of love in its purest form, encapsulating the promise of a new beginning. As Alex and I planned our wedding, the usual joys and stresses of preparing for such a grand day were accompanied by the subtle shadows of Alex's past. Hints of his old hidden scars began to emerge amidst conversations about table settings and guest lists. There were fleeting moments when his eyes would cloud over, or he'd fall silent, seemingly gripped by a memory only he could see. I noticed these instances, the small cracks in his otherwise sturdy facade. My heart ached to know what weighed on him, but I respected his privacy fiercely. Alex was a man who valued his inner sanctum, and I loved him all the more for his complexities. So, I did not press, choosing instead to focus on our love and the excitement of starting our new life together. In the whirl of wedding preparations, my relationship with Mrs. Green, Alex's mother, took on a life of its own. From the outset, she was more than just a future mother-in-law. She was a presence of warmth and understanding, a comforting anchor in the sometimes overwhelming sea of wedding decisions. Her intuition about people was uncanny, and her ability to navigate Alex's moods proved invaluable, especially as the wedding drew closer and his episodes of withdrawal became more frequent. One chilly afternoon, as we pored over old family photo albums searching for inspiration for our wedding slideshow, Mrs. Green shared stories of Alex as a boy, his mischievous smile, his boundless energy, and also, his quiet moments. She spoke with a nostalgic smile, but her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness, a mother's concern that had weathered many unseen storms. It was during these intimate gatherings that I began to understand the depth of their bond, and how deeply the threads of past traumas were woven into the fabric of Alex's current being. Her role in our lives became even more pronounced as she helped me navigate through the complexities of bonding with a man whose heart had been scarred at such a young age. She had an exquisite tact in guiding me on how to be there for Alex, never overstepping, yet always providing just enough insight to help me connect with him on a deeper level. This delicate balance of distance and closeness in her advice helped me respect Alex's pace without feeling shut out. When it came time to choose gifts for Alex, be it his birthday or Christmas, Mrs. Green proved an indispensable ally. She had an exceptional knack for knowing exactly what would touch Alex's heart. Each gift we selected was not just a material item but a symbol, a message in a bottle sent into the depths of his heart, affirming love, understanding, and acceptance. Shopping trips with Mrs. Green for these gifts became our little tradition, times filled with laughter and shared secrets, weaving me deeper into the family tapestry. The most memorable moment came a few weeks before the wedding. After a long day spent finalizing seating arrangements and menu choices, Mrs. Green invited me for tea at her house. The house was quiet, a soft classical melody playing in the background, lending an air of serenity to the room. We sat in her sun-drenched living room, surrounded by plants that thrived under her careful attention, mirroring the nurturing nature of her personality. With a gentle, almost reverential tone, Mrs. Green said she had something special for me. From an old ornately carved wooden box, she pulled out a small velvet case. Inside was a ring, a beautiful antique piece that had belonged to Alex's great-grandmother. The ring was delicate, its band worn thin by time, its stone still catching the light with a fiery sparkle. As she placed it in my hand, her fingers lingered over mine, her touch conveying layers of meaning. "This ring," she began, her voice soft but clear, "is more than just a family heirloom. It is a symbol of our acceptance and trust in you, Jenny. It's a welcome into our family. A family that, like this ring, has weathered many storms and survived. It is a testament not just to the past, but to the future we hope to build with you in it." The weight of the ring in my palm felt monumental, as if the small circle of metal encapsulated more than just familial history. It was a binding promise, a token of faith. The ring, with its intricate engravings and warm golden hue, symbolized the merging of past and future, of memories and hopes. As I slipped it onto my finger, it felt like a shield, imbued with the strength and love of the women who had worn it before me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked up at Mrs. Green, overwhelmed by the depth of her gesture. Her eyes met mine, mirroring my emotions. At that moment, I understood the sacredness of what she had given me. It was an affirmation of my place beside Alex, an endorsement of my role not just as his wife, but as a daughter to her. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise to honor the love and trust you've placed in me." She nodded, her smile tender. "I know you will, my dear. You already have." On the morning of our wedding, The early sun painted the sky with strokes of pink and orange, promising a day as radiant as the love Alex and I shared. The gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the soft, melodious chirps of morning birds. As I awoke, a flutter of excitement danced in my stomach, and a smile spread across my face, the kind that comes from deep within, knowing that today, I would marry the man I loved. The venue was nestled on the edge of a lush, sprawling garden that bloomed with life, each petal and leaf vibrant under the warm glow of the sun. It was here, among the weaving paths and fragrant blooms, that we had chosen to bind our lives together. The garden was more than just a venue, it was a reflection of our relationship, natural, blooming, and beautifully wild. As the morning progressed, the air filled with the sounds of preparation. The clinking of dishes, the soft rustling of floral arrangements being perfected, and the gentle directives of the wedding planner created a symphony of anticipation. Each vendor moved with a purpose, their expertise turning our vision into reality. The tables were set with fine linen, each piece of cutlery placed with precision. Centerpieces of wildflowers and greenery adorned the tables, their colors popping against the crisp white tablecloths. The ceremony area was set in a quiet corner of the garden, under a large oak tree whose branches stretched out as if to embrace the gathering. Beneath its sturdy boughs, a simple wooden arch stood decorated with white and soft pink roses, intertwined with ivy and sprigs of lavender. The chairs for our guests were arranged in a gentle arc, each one adorned with a small bouquet of flowers tied with a ribbon, fluttering lightly in the breeze. Guests began to arrive, their faces bright with joy and attire colorful, adding to the festive atmosphere. The hum of their greetings and laughter blended into the background music, a carefully chosen playlist of soft romantic tunes that Alex and I had spent nights curating. Each song held a memory, a piece of our journey, and now they played for all to hear, setting the stage for the promises we were about to make. As the time drew near, my heart began to beat a little faster, the reality of the moment settling in. Accompanied by my father, I took a deep breath and stepped into the hidden pathway that would lead me to the archway. The sight that greeted me took my breath away. There, waiting for me, was Alex. He stood tall and sure, his suit tailored perfectly to him, complementing his form. His hair was styled neatly, and his face held an expression of awe and tenderness as he watched me approach. The walk down the aisle felt like a lifetime and a moment all at once. With each step, I moved closer not just to Alex, but to the new life we would build together. The eyes of our loved ones followed me, but all I could see was him. As I reached his side, his hand reached out for mine, a silent promise of support and love that sent warmth spreading through me. The ceremony was a heartfelt exchange of vows that we had written ourselves. Alex's voice was steady but filled with emotion as he spoke his vows. His words painted a picture of our past and a promise of our future, each sentence carefully chosen to convey his love and commitment. My vows echoed his in sentiment, spoken through tears of happiness that streamed freely down my cheeks. There was laughter too, as we interjected little anecdotes of our life together, making the ceremony deeply personal and joyously authentic. As we exchanged rings, the symbol of our endless love and the seal of our vows, the oak tree above us seemed to stand a little taller, its leaves rustling as if in applause. The kiss that followed was both a seal of our promises and a celebration, met with cheers and clapping from our guests. The reception that followed was a blur of dancing, eating, and heartfelt speeches. The first dance was to a song that had seen us through our hardest times, its lyrics now a testament to the strength of our bond. As Alex spun me around the dance floor, the world fell away, leaving only the sound of the music and the feeling of being completely, utterly loved. Our families and friends made speeches that brought both roars of laughter and tender tears. Each word spoken was a thread added to the tapestry of our day, weaving a memory that would hold strong in the years to come. The food was exquisite, each bite a burst of flavor, a celebration of our day. The cake, a simple yet elegant design of white frosting and flowers, was cut amidst cheers, its sweetness a perfect metaphor for the life awaiting us. As the day transitioned into evening, the lights dimmed to a golden hue, casting shadows that danced along with the guests. Alex and I moved among our loved ones, our hearts brimming with happiness. Every moment felt suspended in time, from the heartfelt speeches that brought tears to our eyes to our first dance, where we swayed to a melody that spoke only to our souls. The world around us blurred into a background of sparkling lights and soft music, with the only focus being the profound connection between us. Yet, as the night wore on and the last of the guests bid their farewells, a subtle shift occurred. The exhaustion from the day's emotions and festivities began to settle in, and with it came a thickness in the air, as if it were laden with unspoken truths. I sensed it most acutely when we finally retreated to our room, the sanctuary where we had planned to end our perfect day. But instead of the comforting silence I had anticipated, there was a palpable tension, a stirring of something deep and unnerving that I couldn't quite identify. Alex, who had been the bastion of strength throughout our relationship, seemed suddenly distant, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a nervous energy that thrummed quietly beneath his skin. I had always known there were aspects of his past that shadowed his bright smile, hints of dark chapters he had never fully disclosed. Our relationship had been built on a foundation of deep mutual respect and understanding, and I had learned to navigate the delicate balance between his openness and the secrets he guarded so closely. I respected his privacy, never pushing for more than he was willing to share. Understanding that some wounds were deeply ingrained, etched into one's soul by experiences too painful to relive. The unexpected knock at our door came just as I was about to speak, to breach the subject that hung heavily between us. It was Mrs. Green, Alex's mother, her presence on the threshold of our bridal suite as surprising as it was alarming. The sight of my husband whispering urgently with his mother in the dimly lit corridor was something I had not anticipated on our wedding night. The warmth and guidance Mrs. Green had always extended to me felt suddenly invasive, her timing inexplicable. "Mom. I can't come. Can you come in?" Alex's voice, barely a whisper, carried a weight I had never heard before. His words, though softly spoken, seemed to fill the room, making the walls close in around us. My heart raced with a mixture of confusion and concern, questions forming faster than I could voice them. As they stepped into our room, the space that had once felt like a haven now seemed too small, the air too thick, as if filled with the dense fog of impending revelations. Mrs. Green's presence, although always a source of comfort in the past, now marked a moment of intrusion, an unexpected interruption in what should have been a private celebration of our union. Yet the look in her eyes, one of deep empathy mixed with a mother's protective instinct, prompted me to pause, to reassess the situation that was unfolding before me. It was clear that this was not just a breach of newlywed privacy. It was a necessary intervention, a moment that Alex needed more than I had realized. Mrs. Green's eyes flicked between Alex and me, her face etched with a mixture of apology and urgency. It was clear that this was not a mere intrusion, but a necessity born of something deeper, something distressing. Alex, usually so composed, looked visibly shaken, his eyes pleading for understanding. "What's happening?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The air felt thick with unspoken truths, the kind that could alter the course of a relationship forever. There was a palpable pause, heavy with hesitation. Mrs. Green glanced at Alex, who seemed momentarily lost for words, his gaze fixed on the floor. Then, gathering her resolve, she looked directly at me, her voice steady but soft. "Jenny, there's something about Alex's past that you need to know, something he might have struggled to tell you himself." Her words were gentle, but they cut through the silence with the sharpness of glass. After a brief moment of silence, during which Mrs. Green seemed to calculate her answer, she turned to her son with wide eyes. "Wait. You told her about..." Alex shook his head. "Go ahead. What were you thinking? The poor thing must think we're a couple of weirdos." Alex looked deep into my eyes before he sighed and began to reveal his biggest secret. "When I was just 5 years old, the unthinkable happened. A burglar broke the peace of our home by breaking in through my bedroom window. That night, under the cover of darkness, my world changed forever. The intruder's silhouette, the menacing presence in my sanctuary left me frozen in terror. I could not cry out or escape, and the result of the breach was a deep, all-pervading fear that clung to me long after the broken glass had been swept away and the window secured. In the following nights, my bedroom felt like a battlefield, every shadow a reminder of my vulnerability. Sleep, once a refuge, became an insurmountable challenge. But in the midst of my fear, my mother became my guardian angel. Night after night she sat by my bedside, her presence a beacon of safety in the dark. With the gentle timbre of her voice, she spun stories of courage and adventure, of heroes who faced their fears and emerged victorious. These bedtime stories, more than just stories, became our ritual, a shared journey back to a sense of normalcy and safety. My mother's steadfast patience and love taught me that there is a source of strength despite crippling fear. Within us a resilience that can be nurtured and nurtured. Since that terrifying night, my mother has been my steadfast companion in my search for peace as I fall asleep, her presence reminding me that even in our darkest moments we are not alone. The revelation of Alex's childhood trauma had left the room steeped in a solemn air, charged with the rawness of newly shared pain. As Alex's secret unfolded, my initial reaction was one of shock, the kind that sends a chill through your very core, not just because of the horror of what he endured, but because of the profound depth of his hidden scars. My hands trembled slightly as the reality settled over me. This man I loved, so strong and composed, had carried this heavy shadow alone for so long. The weight of his past, a burden he had borne in solitude, now lay between us, but not as a barrier. Instead, it bridged our hearts with a newfound understanding. I felt a deep ache for him, the child who had faced such terror, and the man who had grown up shadowed by fear. But within that ache was a blooming determination, a resolve to be the support he needed, the partner he deserved. Alex looked into my eyes, vulnerability written across his face, and asked a simple question that encompassed so much. "So, how can I help you?" His words, meant to be comforting, only underscored the role reversal we were experiencing. Here he was, still trying to be the protector, the provider, even in his moment of disclosure. "It's not about how you can help me, but how I can help you," I replied gently, taking his hand in mine. The contact was a small physical reassurance that I was there, fully present and ready to face this battle alongside him. Mrs. Green, who had been a silent pillar of strength up until now, spoke up, her voice calm and soothing, providing the guidance I needed. "Whenever Alex feels anxious or overwhelmed, especially at night, specific cuddling has always helped to calm him down," she explained. "Hold him close, with his head resting on your heart. It's a method that has soothed him since childhood." I nodded, absorbing her advice with the seriousness it deserved. Although he has largely outgrown the need for this, his anxiety can still overwhelm him in stressful times, she continued. "It is important to be patient and understanding, and offer him physical reassurance. This approach has often been the key to helping him find peace and sleep." Armed with this new knowledge, I turned to Alex, inviting him into an embrace that I hoped would offer not just comfort, but also a sanctuary from his anxieties. He hesitated for a brief moment, then allowed himself to be held. As he laid his head upon my chest, I could feel his body tensed like a bowstring, the muscles tight with the effort of maintaining his composure. Gradually, as we remained locked in that embrace, I felt the tension begin to ebb from his body, his breathing slowing to match the steady beat of my heart. The room, filled with the echoes of our wedding celebrations just hours before, now resonated with a quieter, deeper connection. Every heartbeat seemed to whisper reassurance, a rhythmic reminder that he was safe, that he was not alone. In that moment, as I held Alex, the significance of what we were doing dawned on me. This was not just about providing comfort in a time of need, it was a profound act of sharing and healing. We were rewriting the narratives of his past fears with a new story, one of trust, support, and unconditional love. As Alex's breaths deepened and evened out, signaling his drift into sleep, the weight of his worries seemed to dissipate, lifting not only from his shoulders but from the air around us. I felt a protective surge, a fierce desire to shield him from any further pain, and a commitment to be the partner he could lean on whenever the shadows of his past loomed too large. Mrs. Green, having observed the transformation from the sidelines, gave a silent nod of approval and gratitude before quietly leaving the room. Her departure was discreet, a respectful acknowledgement of the new intimacy Alex and I were forging. Her expression as she left was one of peace, a mother's relief palpable in her eyes, knowing her son was in caring hands. The impact of that night lingered long after Alex had fallen asleep and the first light of dawn crept into our room. Lying awake, I reflected on the journey ahead. It would require patience, empathy, and an openness to understand and soothe the scars of a trauma I had never experienced. But more than anything, I felt ready to be the partner Alex needed, to walk alongside him as we navigated the complexities of his healing together. The vulnerability he showed and my response to it did not weaken our bond. Instead, it fortified it. We were no longer just husband and wife. We were partners in a journey of healing and understanding. Each day as we navigated his anxieties and fears together, our connection deepened, transforming from romantic love into something far more profound, a sanctuary, a safe haven where we could be our truest selves without fear of judgment. This tender, pivotal night marked not just the beginning of our marriage but the deepening of our bond, a testament to the power of shared vulnerabilities and mutual support. It underscored a fundamental truth about love, that it is at its most potent not in the easy, joyful moments, but in the quiet, challenging ones where we choose to stand together, facing the hidden battles with resilience and hope. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of new beginnings, I knew that together, we were stronger, and together, we would heal. This experience taught us that love is not just about sharing joy and happiness, but also about bearing witness to each other's deepest fears, and standing steadfast in the face of personal demons. It's about building a life where each person feels supported and understood, a foundation so strong that even the darkest past could not destabilize it. Our story, though rooted in pain and vulnerability, is ultimately one of triumph, of love's power to heal and transform. It serves as a testament to the fact that the most profound intimacy comes from baring one's soul and being met with compassion and unwavering support. As Alex and I continue to grow together, we cherish the lessons learned from that night, a night that began with uncertainty but ended with the reassuring understanding that together, we are invincible. This narrative of our first night as a married couple encapsulates the essence of our ongoing journey, a narrative of confronting shadows, fostering understanding, and celebrating the resilient, healing power of love. Boyfriend found out how much money I have. He wants me to pay off a house for us, buy a new car, and fund a trip for him to go abroad. Should I end it? In the heart of a bustling Canadian city, nestled among the clamor and chaos, there lay a small modest apartment that seemed almost misplaced amidst the towering skyscrapers. This was my sanctuary, a place painstakingly curated to embody the values of simplicity and tranquility that I held dear. My name is Mary, and at 28 years old, I had crafted a life quite different from the opulent one I left behind in Italy. Here, in this understated nook, I found peace. The apartment was a one-bedroom affair, with walls painted a soft creamy white that caught the gentle morning light. The furniture was minimal, a comfortable couch, a sturdy coffee table, and a small dining set that had seen better days but still stood strong. The decoration was sparse, with a few carefully chosen pieces that spoke more of sentiment than of monetary value. A small balcony overlooked a quiet street, where the sounds of the city were muted, just enough for me to enjoy my morning coffee in relative peace. Living here, my needs were few, and my desires even fewer. I had learned early on that happiness doesn't come from things, but from experiences, from quiet moments spent reading a book, from laughter shared with a friend, from the soothing ritual of brewing tea. My job as a digital marketing consultant afforded me the luxury of working from home, allowing me to shape my days as I saw fit. This life of minimalism was a deliberate choice, a stark contrast to the lavish, almost grandiose lifestyle of my family back in Italy. My parents and extended family lived in sprawling estates in the countryside, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves, their homes adorned with art and antiques that spoke of generations of wealth and culture. My childhood was filled with long, languid summers under the Italian sun, dinners that stretched into the wee hours, and conversations filled with passionate gestures. It was beautiful, yes, but overwhelming. A life where every moment felt orchestrated, every smile a bit too polished. It was during my university years in Canada that I began to shed the weight of those golden shackles. I embraced a life where I could be just Mary, not the heiress, not the future custodian of centuries-old oil paintings or rare manuscripts. Here, I was free to build a life that resonated with who I truly was, not who I was expected to be. Enter James, my boyfriend of 3 years, a Canadian native like myself in age but vastly different in experience. James came from a middle-class family, his life a tapestry of hard work and modest achievements. He was kind-hearted, with a gentle demeanor that belied his rugged exterior. When we met, it was as if pieces of a puzzle had fallen into place. We shared similar interests in music, loved the outdoors, and both cherished the quiet moments of life. His respect for my simple lifestyle only deepened my affection for him. James never knew about the wealth I had left behind. It was a part of me that I kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of necessity. I feared that revealing my family's wealth might introduce a wedge between us, that it might make him feel inadequate, or shift the dynamics of our relationship in ways I couldn't control. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the assets I would one day inherit. In my heart, I believed that preserving this secret was for the best, protecting both James's self-esteem and the purity of our connection. Our relationship was built on the foundations of mutual respect and shared values. We spent our weekends exploring local markets, cooking meals together, or watching old movies curled up on the couch. It was a peaceful, fulfilling existence, and for a while, I believed it would always be this way. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The catalyst came unexpectedly, in the form of an invitation to a family reunion back in Italy. It was an event I couldn't avoid, my grandmother's 80th birthday, a milestone that demanded my presence. As the date approached, the thought of bringing James along filled me with both excitement and dread. I was eager for him to see the country I loved, to experience the warmth of my family. Yet, I was terrified of how he might react when faced with the reality of my background. With a heavy heart, I booked our tickets, telling myself that it was time to face whatever consequences might come. As we packed our bags and prepared for the journey, I felt the weight of my secret heavier than ever. Little did I know, this trip would unravel the delicate threads of our relationship, exposing not only the truths I had hidden, but also the vulnerabilities we both carried. What lay ahead was a test of love and trust, one that would redefine the future of our relationship forever. The plane descended slowly through the cottony clouds, revealing glimpses of the lush Italian countryside, a stark contrast to the sprawling urbanity of Toronto. As the wheels touched down on the runway, a surge of nostalgia washed over me. Italy was not just my birthplace, It was a repository of my earliest and most cherished memories. Beside me, James peered eagerly out of the window, his face lit with the excitement of a child. This was his first time traveling outside North America, and his enthusiasm was palpable. We navigated through the airport with our luggage rolling behind us, the chatter of Italian filling the air like a familiar melody. I could feel James's curiosity bubbling as he tried to catch phrases and words, his eyes wide with fascination. As we stepped outside, my Uncle Luca was waiting for us, his arms wide open, a broad smile spreading across his face. "Benvenuti," he exclaimed, enveloping me in a warm embrace before turning to James with a firm handshake. "And you must be James. Mary has told us so much about you." James chuckled nervously, exchanging pleasantries in his halting Italian, which he had been practicing for weeks before our trip. As we drove away from the airport, the landscape transformed from urban sprawl to verdant vineyards and rolling hills dotted with olive trees. The beauty of my homeland unfolded before us, each turn and dip revealing vistas more breathtaking than the last. Our destination was my grandmother's estate in Tuscany, a place that seemed suspended in time. The house, a sprawling villa built in the Renaissance style, was perched atop a hill, overlooking acres of vineyards. Its ochre walls glowed under the setting sun, and ivy climbed generously over its ancient stones. It was a stark embodiment of the wealth and history of my family, a visual testament to a legacy that stretched back generations. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, the sound of the tires crunching underfoot, James's expression turned from excitement to awe. "Mary, this place is incredible," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. "I grew up playing in those vineyards," I said, pointing towards the green expanse. "And every stone of this house has a story." The grandeur of the villa was overwhelming even for me, who had seen it countless times before. As we entered, the vastness of the entrance hall with its high ceilings and portraits of stern ancestors seemed to impress upon James the reality of my heritage. The house was alive with the sounds of preparation. The reunion was to be a grand affair, with relatives coming from all over the country. During the following days, James was introduced to a lifestyle so vastly different from our simple contained existence in Canada. Each meal was a feast, each conversation a boisterous symphony of voices. My relatives, adorned in fine clothes and speaking with an effortless elegance, moved through the rooms with a grace that belonged to a different era. James tried to blend in, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet, observant demeanor. I watched him as he interacted with my family, his eyes often wide with a mix of admiration and incredulity. It was during a grand dinner, under the chandeliers of the grand dining room, that I first noticed a subtle shift in his attitude. "Everyone here seems to have their life figured out," he remarked quietly as we watched my cousins animatedly discussing politics and art. "It's like they're playing a game where everyone knows the rules except me." I squeezed his hand, trying to offer reassurance. "They've just had more practice at this kind of thing," I whispered back. As the days passed, the initial shock of the opulence gave way to a budding curiosity. James's questions grew more pointed, his interest in the specifics of my family's wealth more pronounced. "So, how does it all work?" he asked one evening as we walked through the vineyard, the sunset casting long shadows on the ground. "Who inherits what? How do you manage it all?" It was a discussion I had hoped to avoid, but there, amidst the rows of grapevines, I found myself opening up about trusts, management, and the responsibilities that came with such inheritance. James listened intently, nodding as I explained, but I could see the wheels turning in his head, the calculations forming behind his eyes. The remainder of our stay was marked by a series of such revelations. Whether it was the casual display of an antique vase worth more than our apartment, or the old family jewels that came out for a cousin's wedding, each instance seemed to embed a small wedge between us. James's demeanor evolved from one of simple curiosity to something tinged with a hint of entitlement. The boundaries of our relationship, once so clearly defined by mutual respect and simplicity, began to blur as notions of what could be started to infiltrate his thoughts. By the time we were preparing to leave, the air between us had thickened with unspoken words and unasked questions. The drive back to the airport was quiet, a reflective silence that seemed to hold the weight of our shared experiences. As the Italian countryside receded into the distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The trip had not only exposed my wealth but had also unearthed the fragility of our bond. We returned to Canada carrying more than just our suitcases. We brought back a changed dynamic. A new awareness that would soon test the very foundation of our relationship. The seeds of doubt and change sown during those sunny days in Italy were poised to grow into challenges that neither of us could have anticipated. The return to our modest apartment in Canada felt jarring after the lavish expanses of my ancestral Italian villa. As James and I unpacked our suitcases, there was an unspoken understanding that something fundamental had shifted between us during our trip. The light-hearted laughter that had once filled our space seemed dulled, replaced by a pensive quietude that neither of us dared to disturb. In the days following our return, James's behavior began to subtly change. It started with small comments, offhand remarks about, when we have a bigger place, or, our future home. At first I thought these were just aspirational dreams, a way for him to process the grandeur we'd witnessed. However, it soon became clear that his views on our financial dynamics had shifted dramatically. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, James broached the subject of real estate. "I saw a listing today," he mentioned casually, his eyes fixed on his phone. "A house, not too far from here. 3 bedrooms, a garden. It's perfect for us." His tone was light, but the implication was heavy with expectation. I paused, a stir of apprehension in my gut. "James, we've talked about this. I'm happy here. We don't need a big house." He looked up, surprise etching his features. "But why settle for this when we can afford so much more? It's about time we lived like we deserve." His words struck a nerve. It wasn't just the presumption of we when he really meant my money, but also his sudden entitlement to a lifestyle he had never contributed to building. Over the following weeks, these conversations became more frequent. James started to bring up luxury cars, expensive vacations, and even investment opportunities. Each suggestion was grander than the last, each plan more elaborate, anchored firmly on the financial security he assumed we, or rather, I, possessed. The strain began to manifest in other ways too. Social gatherings, once a source of joy, turned into platforms for James to hint at our upgraded lifestyle. At a friend's birthday party, he openly discussed our future trips to Europe and the type of car we should buy next. Each claim felt like a chip away at the privacy and principles I held dear. This transformation in James's demeanor placed me in an emotional conundrum. Here was the man I loved. The man who had once cherished our simple life together, now morphed into someone who saw my inheritance as a stepping stone to material indulgences. It was as if the man I knew had been replaced by a stranger with a distorted sense of entitlement. As his plans grew more detailed, our discussions turned into disagreements. One night, as we lay in bed, the tension that had been brewing finally boiled over. "James, where is all this coming from?" I asked, my voice a mix of sadness and frustration. "Why has everything changed since we came back from Italy?" He turned to look at me, his expression a blend of defiance and confusion. "Changed? Mary, I'm thinking about our future. Your money could give us the life we've always wanted." "But at what cost?" I countered. "You're planning our life as if my money is ours. But it isn't, James. It's mine, and it comes with responsibilities and decisions that you're not considering." The room went silent, the weight of our words hanging between us. James's face softened, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I had fallen in love with. "I just want us to have the best," he whispered. "I might have gotten carried away, but it's only because I want to build something great with you." Despite his reassurances, the seed of doubt had been planted. The following days were a testament to the changed dynamics in our relationship. James's approach had altered subtly. Where once there was partnership, there now lay a transactional expectation. It was not just about sharing a life but about leveraging my wealth for a lifestyle that he now deemed essential. The practical implications of this shift were significant. Financial discussions, once rare and collaborative, became fraught with tension. Planning for the future was no longer about our dreams and goals, but about managing expectations and defending boundaries. I never thought I'd have to deal with him. My financial independence, a source of pride and empowerment, had become a battleground. Moreover, this shift affected how I viewed our relationship's foundation. Trust and respect, once given freely and reciprocally, now required constant negotiation and reassurance. The egalitarian nature of our partnership, which had been one of its strengths, was compromised. I found myself second-guessing not just decisions about money but the motivations behind James's affections and plans. This evolving dynamic also brought with it an emotional toll. There were moments of profound loneliness, times when I felt misunderstood and cornered. The joy that had once colored our daily life together was now occasionally marred by a palpable tension, making our interactions stilted, our conversations careful. In moments of solitude, I questioned the sustainability of our relationship. Could love endure when it was shadowed by financial imbalance and expectations? Was there a way to reclaim the simplicity and sincerity that had once defined us? These were questions that lingered in the quiet corners of our home, unanswered but increasingly urgent. As days turned into weeks, a palpable tension built between us. The air was thick with things unsaid and wishes unexpressed. It was late one evening, as we sat side by side on our couch with the TV chattering idly in the background, that the facade of normalcy finally cracked. "Mary, why don't we consider moving? Somewhere bigger, maybe even start looking at houses?" James ventured cautiously, his voice tinged with a hesitancy that was unlike him. I turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw not just the man I loved but also the growing divide between us. James, why would we do that? This place. It's enough for us, isn't it? Hasn't it always been? He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Well, yes. But don't you think we deserve a bit more? I mean, your family lives so differently. Aren't you ever tempted? The question hung between us, dense and daunting. I sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on us. James, I grew up around all that excess. And yes, it's beautiful. But it's not what makes me happy. I've chosen this life with you because it's what feels right for me. Not because I can't afford any differently. But it's not about what we can afford, Mary, he countered, his voice rising slightly in frustration. It's about what you can afford, and honestly, isn't it a bit wasteful not to use it? His words stung, the implication clear and cutting. I felt a coldness seep into the space between us, chilling the warmth we had cultivated over our years together. Is that how you see it, James? My family's money is a resource for us to tap into whenever we feel like it? Because that's not how I view it. That money, it comes with strings, with expectations and responsibilities that you don't understand. James looked taken aback, his expression softening. I didn't mean it like that, Mary. I just thought, what? That suddenly because my family has money, our plans, our dreams should change? My voice was sharper than I intended, edged with a bitterness that tasted foreign on my tongue. He paused, the air thick with our unsaid thoughts, before he reached for my hand, his touch tentative. I'm sorry, Mary. I suppose I got carried away. It's just all so new to me. I never thought I'd be close to someone with so much possibility. I pulled my hand gently from his grasp, needing the space to gather my thoughts. James, my family's wealth isn't what I want our life to be about. I love our life, our home, just as it is. I don't want that to change because of money. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that punctured the tension. I understand, or at least I'll try to. I love you, Mary. I love this life we've built. I don't want to lose it over fantasies of something that might not even make us happy. It was then I realized how deeply entangled our dreams had become with the reality of my heritage. We sat together, the distance between us filled with the echo of our words, slowly finding our way back to each other. I'm sorry for pushing, James murmured after a long silence, his voice low. I'll respect your feelings about this. We can go as slow as you need. Let's just keep living our life, our way. I nodded, feeling a fragile peace settle over us. It was a temporary resolution, a band-aid over a wound that needed more than just promises to heal. But it was a start, a recognition of our mutual desire to preserve what we had, even in the face of tempting possibilities. As we turned back to the flickering light of the TV, a small smile passed between us, a silent acknowledgement of the complexities of love and wealth, and the simple truth that sometimes, holding on to what you value most requires letting go of what the world tells you should matter. Update. The weeks following our muted confrontation were a study in fragile normalcy. James and I navigated our days with a cautious tenderness, each of us aware of the unspoken fissures slowly spreading beneath the surface of our relationship. I believed, perhaps naively, that we could mend what had been strained by the revelations of wealth and differing desires. But the real test of our bond was yet to come. A test that would shatter the tentative peace we had brokered. The betrayal came on an unexpectedly warm evening, at a gathering hosted by a close friend. It was the kind of casual event we had attended countless times before, a backyard barbecue, where the smell of grilling mixed with laughter and music floated on the late summer air. James and I arrived together, hands linked, our smiles a bit too practiced, too ready. As the evening progressed, I noticed James slipping more comfortably into the crowd, his laughter a little louder, his gestures more expansive with every drink he consumed. I mingled too, but with a mind distracted by the watchful maintenance of my facade. It wasn't until I was by the makeshift bar, fetching us another round of drinks, that I overheard it. No, you don't understand. Mary can afford way more than this. Her family is loaded. She's basically set for life, James was boasting, the words floating over to me, sharp and clear above the hum of party chatter. Frozen, drink in hand, my heart raced as I processed his words. A group of acquaintances around him laughed, someone whistling low in admiration. Seriously, man, that's wild. And here you are living in that tiny place? Another voice chimed in, half joking, half serious. I felt the air leave my lungs in a whoosh, my presence at the bar suddenly suffocating. The casual betrayal, the ease with which James shared my most guarded secret, The very essence of my fears was laid bare in those few flippant words. Navigating my way back to him, the cold grip of dread tightening around my heart, I intercepted his boisterous storytelling. "James, can I speak with you? In private?" My voice was calm, but it carried an edge, a signal not lost on him. His face changed as he followed me to a quiet corner of the yard, the mirth fading, replaced by a dawning realization of the gravity of his mistake. "Mary, Did you think it was your news to share?" I interrupted, the hurt making my words sharper, colder. "Did you think it wouldn't matter to me?" he stammered, a mix of alcohol and genuine remorse muddling his words. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I got carried away, and you decided my privacy, my trust wasn't worth respecting." I could hear the bitter disappointment in my own voice, a sound I never wanted to direct at him. "Mary, I made a mistake. Please, let's just go home and talk about this," he pleaded, reaching for my arm. I pulled away, my decision crystallizing with stark clarity. "No, James, we can't just talk it away this time. This isn't just a mistake. It's a betrayal." The rest of the evening was a blur of hushed apologies and quiet exits. We left separately, the ride home a solitary journey for each of us, filled with the echoing words of what had passed between us. That night, alone in the apartment we had shared, the walls seemed to close in on me, each shared memory now tinged with the stain of betrayal. The breakup was as inevitable as the dawn. When James returned the next morning, his eyes hopeful yet wary, I knew what needed to be said. "I can't do this, James. Your actions last night showed me just how little you respect what I hold dear." "But Mary, everyone makes mistakes. I know I messed up, but I can fix this. We can fix this," he insisted, desperation lacing his voice. "This wasn't just a slip, James. It was a choice. You chose to share something deeply personal about me, not out of love or necessity, but for entertainment. I can't build a life with someone who values their momentary status over our trust." His protests faded as the finality of my words settled between us. The breakup, though unilateral in declaration, was mutual in its necessity. We parted with a heavy silence, the kind that speaks louder than any words of farewell. In the days that followed, the fallout was both personal and social. Mutual friends, caught between allegiances, offered awkward condolences or curious probes masked as concern. I found solace in solitude, turning to my passion for painting, letting the colors express the turmoil that words could not. Each brushstroke was a step towards healing, a way to reclaim the peace that had been disrupted. The betrayal had not just ended a relationship, it had forced me to confront the vulnerabilities I had tried so hard to shield. But in that confrontation, there was growth. I learned that my values were not just preferences but necessities, the core of who I was and who I would continue to be, with or without someone by my side. As I painted, the hues blending on the canvas, I realized that this ending was not just an end, but a beginning. A chance to redefine my boundaries, to strengthen my resolve, and to ensure that my next chapter would be one where trust was not just given, but earned. The days after the party were a haze of conflicting emotions. I vacillated between anger and sadness, betrayal and a strange sense of liberation. The realization that James had so casually disclosed my family's wealth to people who had no business knowing gnawed at me. It wasn't just the fact that he had spoken out of turn, it was the casual disregard for my feelings, the thoughtlessness of his actions. Each time I replayed the scene in my head, my resolve hardened. I couldn't continue a relationship where such fundamental trust was so easily broken. I needed time to think, to process the gravity of what had happened. I spent hours walking through the city, the familiar streets providing a backdrop for my swirling thoughts. By the end of the third day, I knew what I had to do. When James returned home, he looked hopeful, as if expecting that time had softened my stance. I asked him to sit with me, our small living room suddenly feeling too large, too empty. "James, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He nodded, his eyes searching mine for a hint of reconciliation. "I know, Mary, I'm really sorry about what happened. I was drunk and stupid, but I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know you didn't mean to," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "But you did hurt me, deeply. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was a breach of trust, something that's fundamental to any relationship." He looked down, the weight of my words settling in. "I understand that. And I promise it won't happen again. I'll do anything to make it right." I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the hardest part. "James, this isn't just about making it right. It's about the fact that you saw my family's wealth and it changed something in you. You started seeing my money as ours, and that's not what I want for my life." He looked up, a hint of desperation in his eyes. "So what are you saying? You want to end things over this?" I'm saying that our relationship has been fundamentally altered by what's happened. I can't ignore that. I can't go back to the way things were because that trust is broken. And without trust, we have nothing. The silence that followed was heavy, each second stretching painfully. Finally, James nodded, his expression one of resigned sadness. If that's what you really want, then I'll respect it. I'm truly sorry, Mary. I felt a tear escape, quickly wiping it away. I know you are. And I'm sorry too. This isn't what I wanted, but it's what I need to do for myself. The days that followed were a blur of muted interactions and strained conversations. Friends who had been at the party reached out, some with genuine concern, others with a curiosity that felt invasive. I found myself navigating a delicate balance, explaining the situation without divulging too much, trying to protect my privacy even in the wake of its breach. Some friends were supportive, offering their shoulders to cry on and their ears to listen. Others seemed more interested in the gossip, their questions probing for details that felt too raw to share. It was a lonely time, despite the well-meaning gestures, as I struggled to find a way forward. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the familiar tasks that required my full attention. Painting became my refuge. The act of creating something new. A therapeutic process that helped me process my emotions. Each stroke of the brush was a way to channel the pain, the disappointment, the anger. The canvas became a mirror of my inner turmoil, and as the days passed, the chaotic swirls of color slowly began to take form, reflecting my journey towards healing. I also started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the pages, unfiltered and raw. It was a way to make sense of the tangled web of emotions, to understand the why and the how of what had happened. Writing became a nightly ritual, a time for reflection and self-discovery. Through these creative outlets, I began to reclaim my sense of self. The betrayal had left scars, but it also taught me valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and the importance of protecting what mattered most to me. I emerged from the experience stronger, more resolute, and more determined to live a life defined by my values, not by the expectations or judgments of others. As time passed, the initial sting of the betrayal faded, replaced by a quieter, more profound understanding of what I needed in a relationship. I knew that the next time I opened my heart to someone, it would be with a clearer sense of my own worth and a firmer grip on the boundaries that protected my peace. In the end, the breakup was not just an end but a beginning. It marked the start of a new chapter in my life, one where I was more attuned to my own needs and more protective of my own happiness. It was a hard-won lesson, but one that I carried with me as I moved forward, ready to face whatever came next with a renewed sense of purpose and strength.